Everyone has 5 minutes to review that opening statement. Each one has they both have 15 minutes to start crossing their 2 points, and each one has 8 minutes to close what they are trying to say. That's correct, right?
Yes, and just a quick note: during the cross-examination, only one person can ask questions. The other one has to answer. Just a quick note.
Okay.
You understand, Infamous?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm assuming I'm going first, right? Infamous? Is that okay?
Yeah. And it
All
probably
right,
helps
so
define adequate somewhere in there.
all right, so we're debating Aaron adequately protected parody. Infamous is denying. I am affirming. So, Rod, can you please start the timer?
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
All right, so. All right, good, thank you. Okay, so the reason why I believe that Aaron adequately protected parody is not only did he kill hundreds of millions, if not a billion people, which some people say he does, and they're completely reasonable for thinking that, he destroyed their oil refineries. He destroyed their steel refineries. He destroyed transportation logistics. But the thing that makes me feel safe as a Paradisian person is the fact that he destroyed all of the world's ships. They make a very specific point in chapter 130 that he destroys them. They gather all of them up, and Aaron pretty much instantly vaporizes them. This juvenile way of thinking, oh, because there are more people than us, we will certainly be killed. That is very faulty. What you have to ask yourself is, how are these people a threat to us? Now, I'm assuming my opponent and most reasonable people would feel relatively safe knowing that the 20% of the world are paraplegics if they were paraplegics. But in a geopolitical sense, not having any ships or transportation logistics, that's the equivalent, one could say, of being paraplegic. They don't pose a threat. Let's say they are the 20% left over, which they are. How are they going to attack Parody? Parody is an island. They're going to have an amphibious invasion, which are hard to do for developed countries. But amphibious invasions are impossible to do if you don't have any ships. And they have to start from ground zero because not only did Aaron destroy all of their ships, again, he trampled their steel refineries. And we know that he trampled up to northern Marley, we can see, in Fort Salta. Fort Salta is pretty far up north. They're going to have to go down thousands of miles from the, northern part of Africa, which, again, Africa, the continent, down to Madagascar. That requires a very complex, intricate, and well-working war machine that is extremely, extremely difficult to do. Again, even for developed nations. Now, another thing, how are these people going to communicate? These people who are left over, right? Telegram? Well, Aaron's trampled all of that. Letter? Aaron's trampled roads, we could easily assume. And who are going to be the people that are going to deliver this? Aaron's killed about 800 million to 1 billion people. The other thing is that we can look at the real world for this. We have multiple examples of this in the real world. Take, for example, Japan. What was needed to end Japan? Did we have to kill every single person in Japan? Well, no. They surrendered. And when they surrendered, they didn't fight back. Why didn't they fight back? Well, because they couldn't touch us. People don't just rashly lash out and go on suicide missions. The Japanese did do that, however, and they lost the war. Just because someone would act unreasonably does not mean that their country's going to get genocided. Because Japan did that, and we forced them into submission without having to kill every single man, woman, and child in that country. Another thing, take for example the world's sole superpower today, the United States. Now, we spend about $600 to $800 billion on our military. Second largest spender is China. What do we spend our money on? Do we have the largest army? No. Do we have the most ships? No. Do we have the most self-propelled artillery? No. We invest in air power. We have the most aircraft carriers, and we have the largest air force in the world, and the second largest air force in the world, that being the Navy. Now, why do I bring up air power? Well, it's simple. In 139, we see the Amitsubu as allies on the island with Historia and the Jaegerist. This means that Parody has access to air power, which, if you remember, I believe it was in chapter 94. Let me just double check this real quick. Chapter 93. Marley was fretting their situation because of the advent of air power. The Titans were able to dominate people for centuries because of their incredible power. But that power was waning because of air power. Parody has air power. We know that. Maybe we don't know that for sure, but we can infer they have air power in 139. And we know they know how to use oil because we see them using cars. The rest of the world has neither air power nor Titans. And remember, the general says, who was killed, by the way, the general says that the Titans would do nothing but watch from the sky as bombs rain down upon them. And we all know that there's more Titans by a long shot on the Earth than there are airplanes. Yet the general was still worried because air power is a complete negator to that. And another thing before I close out is what I just mentioned, that general was killed. All these people who knew warfare, all this experience, all this knowledge that they learned, they're all dead. The captains are dead. The generals are dead. So, again, even if they did have this all, they have no one who knows how to operate this machinery. You could dump a giant fleet into the port of Marley, and no one would know how to get it a mile. They could train for sure, but that would take years and years and years. And every single year that goes by, Parody gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And I feel it's my last thing. That was a lie. My last thing will be this. Eren put the world in such a desperate situation, they can't even think about warfare. He destroyed their farms, he destroyed their storehouses, he destroyed their homes. People need food, shelter, and clean water. That's what they're concerned about. How are they possibly going to think about launching this complex amphibious assault, much less a genocide on the Paradisian people, if they don't have the basic necessities met? I can do the rest of my time.
Great. Rod, let me know when my clock starts. If you're there, otherwise I'll just start since I won't need the full time.
Rod.
Right, well, the time is done.
Okay, perfect. So obviously I'm arguing for and Rod, mute yourself since I'm echoing.
All right, Imfanous, your time begins in 1, 2, 3.
Perfect. So obviously I'm arguing against Eren adequately defending Parody at the end of Attack on Titan. I think a couple of things went unaddressed in Beluga's opening statement. For starters, it kind of boils down to one, well, since we're talking about Eren, what is he capable of as a character in universe? Two, what was his actual goal with respect to keeping Parody safe from the rest of the world? Which, for those who have forgotten, the rest of the world declared war against Parody prior in the story. And then three, whether what he actually did lines up with what his actual goal was. And so, for starters, I'm a fervent believer that Eren is basically borderline omniscient within the realm of the story. This is evidenced by the fact that, one, he is the founding Titan. Two, he allegedly can see the past, present, and future, at least insofar to his death. And three, he does have a certain degree of agency within the story, regardless of whether the outcome that we got was inevitable. So given that baseline for Eren as a character, it's worth pointing out what his goals were. Of course, we won't delve into all these goals, but we'll point out the one that's relevant to parity being adequately defended. So his goals were 1, end the Titan Curse, cool, not relevant. 2, keep the people of parity safe. And so naturally, with keeping parity safe, we do have the hindsight to see the end result, right? So at some arbitrary time in the future after Mikasa's death, the island of parity goes on to get bombed by some entity. It doesn't really matter which. And so thinking back to how Eren, 1, is borderline omniscient, 2, has the power of the founding titan, it begs the question of why would he allow anyone to survive knowing that the rest of the world has, beef or qualms or prejudice against the people of parity? Given that he had the founding titan, and again, regardless of the outcome, it would only seem sensible, given his position of power, to just eliminate the totality of his enemies. This is evidenced by the fact that because he can see the past, present, and future, he would know that in the past, even Marley, as a byproduct of the Titan Civil War, was able to exact its revenge on Eldia, despite the fact that, the old nation of Eldia was able to use Amir's founding Titan and the subsequent, child Titans, if you will, to dominate the Marleyan people. Other than that, I will point out, just before cross-examination, that it's odd that we would use real-life references as it pertains to this, especially taking the Japan reference, or taking the US reference to Japan and how we didn't need to kill all of Japan. And it's somewhat ironic just because Japan is probably the relative size of parity, whereas the US is probably the size of Marley, so that's the rest of the world comparatively. And so it's weird to have, a similar, outlook with respect to that when parity is literally the size of Japan and the rest of the world is the size of the US. So it's kind of the inverse relationship, which I think is kind of suspicious. But for now, I'll leave it at that.
Imfanous, is that your entire argument?
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Imfanous, your time is over.
I'm sorry, is it my turn to do something?
Yes, now each debater has 5 minutes to refute and deny the arguments of his respective opponents. Beluga, you go first.
Okay, so let me start off with the most valid criticism of my opening statement. So you said that using Japan as a real life reference is faulty because the United States is the more powerful country or maybe more voluminous in population as well, and Japan is smaller. That is a good point. However, if you look out throughout the history of warfare, literally no one had to genocide an entire warring nation's population in order to win a war. Now, I brought that example up because it's an example that everyone knows as an American, it's an example most familiar with, but you could really use any example in regards to that. People don't go and annihilate an entire population after losing a war. That has literally never happened in the entire history of humanity. Literally has never happened. Now, as you said at the beginning of your opening statement, Eren's goals is to protect parity, and he's omniscient, so why would he leave people alive? Well, that's actually irrelevant. I didn't say whether Eren betrayed his goals or not. All I said is that he adequately protected parity, and from what I see, he adequately protected parity. Again, aside from everything I said in my opening statement, I just would like to know how this amphibious invasion is going to happen. I would like to know that as a Paradisian person. I don't care what Eren's goals are. Or how much power he has, because he make it so I feel safe sleeping at night, because I know that there's no way that an land army that's sufficient enough to beat parity in an armed conflict is going to come over. And you mentioned You mentioned the last 6 pages, which I'm glad that you said it doesn't really matter who it is. So don't know why you mentioned it in the first place. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is because I'm just not going to get into debate about what happened where in the last 6 pages, because there's no empirical data to prove what happened either way. Now, I want to touch again on the real life references. And Rod, please tell me if I missed one of his points here, because that's breaking debate rules. The reason why I use real life references in general is simply because if the story is not realistic, there's no use debating it. Why can't Aaron just do 4% rumbling then? Wouldn't 4% be enough then? Because it's a fictional scenario? No. We're sticking to the real world. We're sticking to the real world. And you want to get into a complex geopolitical debate, which I am more than happy to do. So, yes, I will be using the real world in my conversations because we see examples throughout history of similar situations, and Attack on Titan does not deviate far from reality in this aspect of the story. Now, Rod, if that's everything, I would cede the rest of my time.
So that was it.
Was that all his points? Did I miss something? Infamous, you can jump in too.
I mean, I think so, I guess.
Restore the counter then.
So should I be using this time to question you or using this time to just rebuttal?
No, cross X is when we question each other, which is 15 minutes. You are now refuting my opening statement.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, that.
All right, Infamous, your time begins in 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, so I think one, as a preface, going back to what I guess I had originally said, right? Given that I'm a believer that he's, borderline omniscient, obviously not completely, but borderline omniscient, right? I think the degree of responsibility Aaron holds when it comes to defending parody would be different than like the responsibility that, to take an extreme example, Carla would have because she's dead. So the level of ability she would have to actually defend parody at this point in the story, would be nil, short of like being in the afterlife and being able to provide moral support. And so when we talk about how, rumbling 80%, for example, or why not 4%, right? And for whatever percentage it was, we wipe out all these resources. There's a lack of leadership, so on and so forth. The bottom line is, and the story itself kind of evidences this because of the inevitable outcome of parody, is that given sufficient time, if there are people who either want revenge or want to advance their own goals, right, by whatever conflict that may be, then there will be the means for that to actually happen. We do know that, obviously after the time skip, the 3-year time skip, that parody itself was, upping its military strength because they were of the belief that if they do not fight, then there's a chance that the rest of the world could retaliate. Aaron himself even acknowledges that by saying that they won't be able to retaliate immediately, right? That is a very, qualified statement. I definitely agree that they will not immediately be able to retaliate, but again, given sufficient time, they definitely will. And by Aaron framing it that way, he seems to acknowledge that that is the case. So that is reason number one why I think it's irresponsible on his part to even allow that to be a possibility, given that he has the power to put an end to it, right? And that's notwithstanding saying that there might be a civil war someday in parody that causes their demise, but as it pertains against the outside world, he did have the means to complete the rumbling, predeterminism notwithstanding. Beyond that, when we talk about, again, going back to like the lack of leadership point, it goes back to what I just said. Given sufficient enough time, pretty much anything could possibly happen, right? In the same way that Eldia stomped out Marley at one point, there will be those in the future that will fill the void, if they deem it necessary. So saying that we've done enough now doesn't exactly guarantee that we've done enough into the foreseeable future, right? And I think it's a huge misstep at the very least to not have massacred the rest of the world, regardless of where you stand morally with respect to that. Other than that, I think you kind of pointed out how it's somewhat I guess, erroneous to say it's not right to like compare the whole Japan US thing. I think the morals and the politics of the Attack on Titan world are fundamentally different than the real world. And unlike in the real world, where, as much as I hate to say this because it's not an in-universe reason for saying this, but there are actual consequences for our actions. AOT is completely like fictitious or whatever, and so it's pretty much an anything goes scenario, especially given what kind of morals the characters actually have about murder, if you will. For now, I'll just leave it at that.
All right, Infamous, was that it?
Nah, I just said I'll leave it at that for no reason.
Roddy got your.
Is it just me or I cannot hear Beluga? Oh. Okay, what the fuck?
All right, then. We will go now to the cross-examination phase of the debate. Now both candidates will have 15 minutes to make comments on each other.
Okay, so you want to go first, Infamous?
Yeah, so this is the question part.
Yeah, so you ask me questions. I can't ask you anything. I have to answer your questions. So
Okay. And obviously feel free to disqualify any question that you feel is loaded, I suppose.
that's Raleigh's job. I can't. That's biased. I can't do that.
Regardless, why is it, from your perspective, that we discount the inevitable results in parody when just even discussing whether or not Aaron adequately defended the island?
Can you repeat that?
Why do we discount the inevitable outcome, or like the inevitable destruction of parody, as it pertains to Aaron adequately defending parody?
Because in geopolitics, nothing's inedible. There's lots of moving pieces, including military strength and leadership. I would probably say the disposition of leadership. So nothing's really inedible in regards to that.
But given the fact that we know that parody gets destroyed, and given that we know Aaron had the capacity to eliminate some arbitrary percentage of people, would it not be more of a quote unquote sure thing, even in the moment, to just go to 100% and not risk having the 20% feel bitter or whatever negative emotion might come with being rumbled?
Well, we don't. First off, we don't know if parody gets destroyed. We know if they're engaged in warfare. Number one. Number two, we don't know why or who they're engaging in warfare with, and Aaron doesn't know that happens in the future because he's dead when that happens. So, from what I'm seeing in 139 and 130 and 100, Aaron has made it extremely extremely unlikely for them to do any significant damage to parody. And every year that goes by that they're trying to build their farms, build up their oil, build up their steel, train their soldiers. That's every year that parody gets better at something. They already have steel refineries. We know this. They already have. They know how to use oil. We know this in 139. And we know how to flight mechanics. So that's every year that goes by, parody gets exceptionally more powerful.
Okay. Just to get back to some of the more axiomatic pieces of what I said, would you agree that Aaron is more or less omniscient up until the point of his death as it pertains to at least the experiences of the subjects of Ymir?
I think it's a fair assessment. Yeah, I think he's pretty. Yeah, he's pretty powerful. Yeah, I would say he's overwhelmingly powerful.
Okay, and then going back to what I had said, I guess in my rebuttal, do you think it's agreeable that responsibility with respect to any given situation scales with the level of power someone has over a situation?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay.
But there's a cap.
What do you mean by cap?
Well, like what I see is that like the leader of the country has most responsibility, and I know technically the story is supposed to be the leader, but Aaron is acting as the leader of the country. So I'm saying just because he has more power than any other, he has as much power, he has as much responsibility as any world leader has.
Okay, and so if I understand you correctly, and just confirm that this is your belief, Aaron, short of like title, right, is the de facto leader at least at
Aaron,
least
what
at the time.
now?
He's the de facto leader at the time, like the time of like the end of the story, right? As opposed
Yeah,
to Astoria, and so he bears the most responsibility with respect to parity at that time, right?
yeah, I would say yeah.
And so, regardless of what this cap is on one, like any given individual's responsibility, we've agreed that it does scale up until a point. Why not, right?
Hmm.
So, and perhaps this might be reiterating a point you made, but how is it then that you can say he adequately defended parody if inevitably, regardless of how it happened, right? He has one job, defend parody, right? So, regardless of how it happened, that shit gets bombed. Is he not liable for that in some capacity?
Um, no, from what I see, 139, no, because it looks like Mikasa's dead after. So, and the reason why I'm bringing up Mikasa is simply to say it's the same reason why I brought up George Washington in Debate Club. It's like, okay, so the White House gets set on fire in 1812. Is that George Washington's fault? We invade ourselves in 1860. Is that George Washington's fault? Well, no, right? And we can go down the list of every single powerful world leader that has had their country invaded or killed or whatever. I say it's not Aaron's fault simply because, again, if you look at what he did in 130, it is clear to me that, barring a spectacular miracle of epic proportions, the outside world is not going to invade parity and it's not going to, cannot invade parity properly to the point where it's a effective war strategy. So no, I wouldn't say it's Aaron bears responsibility for that. And again, it could be a civil war, as we all know, and you can't just disregard that.
And so,
Aaron can't. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Aaron can't defend parity from herself.
Okay, so yeah, before we touch on that, so from an in-universe perspective, then, are some of the characters, and in this case, let's be specific, right? Historia and the other Jaegerists that are running the country 3 years after the fact, right? Are they dumb, naive, or some other negative, description of them because they feel that they need to continue to fight or, arm themselves in a militant fashion to ensure their safety? Because from what I understand of your perspective is that, well, Aaron's done enough, so I should feel safe day to day, right? It's highly unlikely. So are they naive for like preparing in the way that they are?
No, of course not. It's very prudent. In just the same way, and again, I'm going to use the real world again, just the same way that we're safe from invasion, the United States is, but I still would like us to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on our military each year.
Gotcha. And so going back to the Civil War piece of it, right? And I think you kind of alluded to how it wouldn't be like Aaron can't save parody from itself, right? Like, was that the sentiment?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to be forward, I disagree with that. I think all leadership has a responsibility to put a system in place. Knowing that all systems are flawed, of course, but to put a system in place that will not result in the system collapsing on itself. And so whether it's Marley that decimates parody, or whether it's parody having a civil war sometime later, no matter how little it is, or like how little of a responsibility it is on Aaron, or the onus on Aaron, I think he's liable for this. And so I guess I'm curious to just better understand why wouldn't Aaron be responsible if parody had a civil war and destroyed itself? Given that he was the de facto leader at the time, which we agree on, how is he not liable for what happens in the aftermath of all of these events?
Because Aaron cannot control human nature. A civil war is practically inedible for all countries. Most countries have a civil war. Some countries even have multiple civil wars in their lifespan, and so no amount of system would make it so that he wouldn't have a civil war, unless, of course, if he just left one person alive, like what Aaron said.
Okay, and since we're running low on time, going
We're
back
not
to more
running low. You can have
going more axiomatic on things, we kind of assessed that his omniscience, as we defined it, was reasonable to think. In general, do we believe that Aaron's actions were, I don't know I don't feel like going on a tangent about this, but do you feel they were predetermined?
I don't. Do
That,
you have
that
other
is
pretty
that is to
Okay.
say he had no other choice but to behave the way he did.
What do you? Okay. So what do you mean by no other
And
choice?
that's not to say he wouldn't have done that anyway, because that's what he wants. It's just a function of did Aaron have agency throughout the story?
Yes. Yes, I do believe that. Yes.
Okay, and so given what we know about the founding Titan, right? Just from
Yep.
your I guess perspective, was there no way for him to use the founding Titan to? And of course, I suspect you'll disagree with this, but was there no way for him to better protect or set up the people of Parity for success prior to freeing, having Ymir be freed and what have you?
This is the same conversation we had about the kid who steals the card. I mean, he could have. I mean, he could have killed everyone in the world, right? Just as though you could kill an unarmed person who's trying to rob you, right? That would guarantee it. Yes, of course. However, it's incredibly unnecessary. And and now that you bring this up, the other question that I keep having myself asking is, well, how much time? Well, actually, I can't ask that. But from my perspective, I think, well, how much time is killing everyone in the world going to buy? Because we know they're going to have a conflict eventually, right? And to me, it just seems incredibly unnecessary to kill literally everybody in the world when you can just kill their military installations, transportation, and infrastructure, and their ships.
So there's this whole aura of like what is necessary, and I think in part, I guess you're saying that, necessity kind of defines adequacy. And of course, I'm taking a very results oriented lens when looking at this, but by leaving 20% or some arbitrary percentage of people that will hate and resent you for, murdering their friends and families and what have you, does that not leave risk for revenge or the risk of revenge?
Of course, it leaves risk, but again,
So,
there's been hold on, there's been a bunch of people who've gone to warfare, and it does not get ended in a genocide of literally the entire country. We embarrassed the United Kingdom on the world stage. Did they come back and genocide all of us?
so
Oh,
given
I can't
that,
ask that,
I
but
mean,
what
I
I'm trying to
can,
say is that didn't happen.
so given that we amicably agree that there is a risk associated with leaving some arbitrary percentage of people alive, and given that Aaron had agency, and given that he could have went to 100% based off of how we framed this, it goes back to a point I made. Why, if you have the power to reduce or further minimize the risk, would you not do so, whether it was necessary or not? Intentionally opening the door for more risk is irresponsible. Do you find that agreeable?
No, don't find it agreeable at all because, as I said beforehand, if an unarmed child came to rob me, I would not shoot him. Right? There is risk involved, right? Because if let's say he goes to jail, he can hate me. He can have brothers. He can come back and break into my house. The reason why I say I'm fine with it being whichever is necessary is because we take risks all the time, and even in our daily lives, like driving as an example. So for me, to eliminate every single scenario, even the ones that are wholly unrealistic and spectacular, is insane to me when we're talking about killing people who are innocent and have nothing to do with anything. That's why. Now, if this was inanimate objects, then sure, there's no reason not to guarantee it. But the problem is that they're not inanimate objects; they're human beings, and it is completely unrealistic to assume that they're going to do anything because of the things that I mentioned in my opening statement.
So why? So I guess the last question I have: why should me, you, Aaron, or anybody else in the story make an assumption about something when they can be certain that by eliminating more people, there is an inherently lesser risk to parody? Like, why should anyone have to assume in the universe,
What do you
especially
mean? Like,
especially like in Aaron's position, right? If he knows that there's an inherent risk by leaving people alive, why would he like what reason is there to assume that it's not necessary to do that? Why not just do that anyway? Because you know with less people there's less risk, given the axiom that there's other people alive.
same reason people drive, because it is spectacularly unrealistic that anything bad would happen, and you're talking about killing human beings who are innocent. That's why.
Okay, I disagree, but I'll leave it at that.
Alright, debaters, that was it. Now we will proceed to the next parts of the debate.
Okay, hold on a second.
Now, each debater will have 8 minutes in total to do their closing statement. During this phase, each debater must summarize their entire point and try to give an overall response to what they try to argue.
Wait, I didn't have my cross-ex yet.
Alright, Beluga, then you will go.
Yeah.
Fifteen minutes, right?
Yeah, 15 minutes, and then we'll go to our closing statements.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, so I guess my first question to you would be, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much risk does 20% leave? And to define terms here, 1 would be like getting struck by lightning while winning the lottery, and 10 would be, taking a bear's cub away and then lying down on the floor.
Not to like dodge, but there's no way for me to give an exact quantifiable number on that.
I understand. I'm trying to gauge what exactly, because we agree that there's risk, so to speak, involved. I'm trying to figure out if we're on the same page as to how much risk is involved.
Okay. Let's go with 8, just based off of how the cycle of hate is presented in the story.
8. You think that parody has an 8 on a scale from 1 to 10 as far as risk factor goes?
Yeah, long term for sure.
Okay. Okay, what do you mean by long term? What, just give a range of a year. The years, is it 1,000 years? Is it 20 years?
Let's go with less than 100.
So you think that there is a strong, or I probably should say more than strong, very strong possibility that in less than 100 years, the world's gonna, I assume, genocide parody? Is that what it is?
Um, Definitely strike back in the capacity that was shown to us.
Strike back. What does strike back entail? Because again, that could be a whole bunch of things. Like, you mean
I
like a
will
tariff, or do you
I
mean
will default
genocide?
I will default to the story in which some B-2 bomber looking things are dropping shells.
Me too. So are you now making the claim that you know that's Marley? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just making the claim that something like that would happen.
Well, what exactly are you saying is happening? Because we saw a couple of panels of warfare. Mind you, again, the White House was on fire in 1812. If you saw the White House on fire in 1812, lots of people would assume some very horrific things happened when in fact they didn't. So I'm going to need you to explain more what you mean by what we saw in the last pages.
Let's just replace Marley with the non-parody people. So anybody that's on the outside, I suppose.
Well, okay? So you said there's a very strong possibility, Nate, a very strong risk that in less than 100 years, what we see in the manga happens. Now, I'm asking you, what exactly are you seeing in the manga?
Yeah, I'm referring specifically to that scene of those B-2 bomber looking things dropping shells on parody.
So you're referring to just a bombing campaign.
Yep,
That's it.
works for me.
Okay, so it's okay. So you want to kill literally everyone from the outside worlds, to avoid a bombing campaign. That the parody may or may not have won. That's your is that your position?
My position is that in order to minimize the risk, given the power to do so, I would wipe out 100% of those people.
Okay, risk for what? Because here's the thing for me: protecting parody means giving parody an equal shot to defend herself or ward off invaders, right? So if we take things like the War of 1812, 9/11, does that then mean that our leaders have failed us and we should have genocided literally everyone outside of our walls, our borders?
I mean, I reserve comments on real life, but I mean, I don't think that's like terribly relevant here. But yes, I do think we should have killed like I think the people of Paris or Aaron should have killed everyone. The fact, like even just the notion of the point of protecting parodies to give them an equal shot, that in itself is ridiculous, and I think it's wildly irresponsible by Aaron to do that.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this again. So 9/11 happens. Does that mean that we should have killed literally everyone in Saudi Arabia?
No.
Okay, so 9/11 killed 1,000 people, destroyed a bunch of government buildings. You're saying that of itself, or I think it's actually 2,000 people, more than that, north of that. You're saying that in itself does not justify killing literally every Saudi Arabian, and I'm assuming you're saying that because we're relatively safe, right? Is that your position?
My position, I mean, to be very frank with you, and I don't know if this kind of undermines the actual debate, but my moral compass in the real world is different than the moral compass I would apply to fictional characters.
Okay, well, that's irrelevant because I'm talking about whether or not Aaron adequately protected parodies or not. If you say it's fictional and the moral compass is irrelevant, well then sure, let's kill everyone. Why not? Let's let parodies get genocided. Why not? What's the point in keeping parodies around if your moral compass is around? Why are you so angry at Marley then? Why are you angry at Annie then? Isn't it fine for parody streams to get genocided?
So this is actually like a debate that actually happens in universe, right? Like there's the utilitarian arguments made, right? And Aaron said he can't accept an end like that, so he's selfish, or he values his friends and family in universe more than the people he doesn't fucking know. That sounds very reasonable to me for the moral compass that I would apply to their world. And so yeah, that's why that's the case. That's why I wouldn't allow.
Well,
If I'm Aaron, that's why I would not allow parodies to get trampled, because ultimately it's okay to be selfish.
So you're saying you're a utilitarian in real life, but you're not a utilitarian in Attack on Titan.
That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in Attack on Titan, the utilitarian argument isn't one that Eren should just accept, nor did he accept.
I don't accept it either, which is why again, the rumbling was not some cute fluffy thing that killed hundreds of millions of people, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not a utilitarian at all. But what I'm saying to you is, you're fine with thousands of Americans dying in 9/11 and not genociding literally everyone in Saudi Arabia. I simply ask you why.
I mean, so as it pertains to 9/11, it's because everybody in Saudi Arabia isn't complicit in the ideology that would inevitably lead the Taliban and those who are working with them in 9/11.
So you think that literally everyone outside the walls agrees with hating Elia and wanting to genocide them?
Definitely not.
Okay, so you admit that not everyone hates Eldia, and in fact, we know that people are sympathetic towards the Eldians, but at the same time, you still want to genocide them, literally all of them, to avoid what?
The risk of the outside world decimating my people in Paradise if I'm Eren.
Okay, when you say decimate, do you mean kill a tenth of the population, or do you mean genocide?
Either or. I'd want to prevent any violent situation, but whatever works.
You want to prevent any violent situation. Well, unfortunately for you, that is literally impossible. If you want to prevent any violent situation, do what Erwin said to do. Reduce the human population down to 1. If you are actually considering killing 800 million people, 800 million to 1 billion people, and more to avoid violence not happening, not only is that an exercise in futility, it is extremely morally deplorable.
There's no question there, so go on.
Okay. So you agree it's an exercise in futility?
I'm okay with agreeing with that. Even it could be naive, it could be stupid, but ultimately it would be an action that I believe would minimize the risk. And it being more.
Well, I just said it was an exercise in futility. You said.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it.
Well, yeah, I don't care about the morals either.
And so to be clear with like my answer, I'm okay with describing it as such because ultimately for me, the ends would justify the means in the context of Attack on Titan.
No, you don't understand what I said. I said it's an exercise in futility. Therefore, it is morally deplorable because you're killing people for something that is going to happen within not 100 years, within 20 years there'll be violence. So that is why it's morally deplorable. It's not morally deplorable because you want to defend your country. Defending your country is a noble thing to do. And I am not the person that you can say, well, I want to help my country and F the rest of the world. I'm totally on board with that. The problem is that, again, Eren, from what we see, 100, 130, he did a pretty damn good job doing that. And you want to kill literally everyone in the world because you want to avoid violence happening, which is exercise in futility.
That would be correct. Right? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that is. I have nothing else to say. I will see the rest of my time.
Okay. Wait, Rod.
All right, that was the third part of the debate. Now we will move on to the last part, which is the closing statement. Each debater will.
Well, that worked out well.
The hell? Rod?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, just making sure everything's good. All right. Rod, if Imfanous wants to go first, he can go right ahead.
Beluga, you go first. You will have 8 minutes in total, then Infamous will go. We'll have 8 minutes in total. Then we will do a poll to try to democratically choose our winner.
All right.
All right, Beluga, you go first. 1.
I mean, I don't think it's
2.
fair to do a poll because it's mostly EDs here, but go ahead.
1, 2, 3.
All right. Welcome. I forgot how to pronounce your name. Welcome. Anyway, so what do we see in this debate? Well, I thought I articulated pretty clearly that it is extremely, extremely unlikely for people with no farms, no storehouses, no oil, no steel, no ships, no captains, no soldiers, and I hope you guys remember that they brought even their towed artillery to stop Aaron, and that was vaporized. So I think I articulated pretty clearly that it's a spectacular anomaly if Parody gets genocided, right? Now, my opponent during the cross-ex said that he knew his goal still was going to do it anyway, which begs the question: what are you trying to accomplish? If you know what you're trying to, if you know that your goal is an exercise in infertility, why are you striving to accomplish it? Better yet, why are you killing hundreds of millions of people to accomplish this goal? My position is very simple. I care, as a person who's grown up with Attack on Titan from Parody's perspective, I care about Parody more than anyone else, and I'm not going to apologize for that. And I'll do whatever is necessary to secure Parody's safety, and it ends there. If an unarmed child comes into my house alone, I am not going to shoot him in the head and then pulse check. Would that guarantee my safety? Absolutely. But I don't need to do that. I can simply apprehend him and call the police. It does have inherent risk involved, but it is wholly unnecessary to shoot him in the head and then pulse check. Now, that's really all I have to say, because my opponent literally said his goal was exercise and fertility. So, I will concede the rest of my time. Rod?
That was the entire argument for Beluga's part. Now Infamous will have 8 minutes to do his closing statement.
8 minutes? Wow. I should make the most of it.
Infamous, your time begins in 1, 2, 3, go.
Yeah, so, 1, Aaron is a morally deplorable character. Genocide is bad. But I'm of the opinion that if you're going to be morally deplorable, you might as well commit to it, as opposed to, pussyfoot around and leave a non-zero risk of your people being attacked by the outside world. Other than that, I'm gonna go look up what the word, I think he said futility. I'm gonna look up what that means, and that's all. The end.
All right, that was the end of our debate. Now we will do a poll to democratically choose our winner.
Wait, this place is a democracy?
And I wouldn't take it too seriously. It's mostly ending defenders here, but I think I won, but that's just my opinion. If
You do realize that my stance is like the Hope Chat / AoE stance on this exact topic and not the ending defender stance. So I'm not sure why you say that as if it works to your disadvantage.
Well, I'm saying like they're biased towards me is what I'm saying. So, I didn't feel too bad about it. Honestly, if I was you, I'd just leave right now. I'll go see you in debate club because. Oh, and by the way, guys, I know there's a funeral scheduled for tomorrow. I will be baking bread for the funeral, so there will be refreshments.
Yeah, Fula, I think I obviously I came severely underprepared. Like I just pulled up, but
That's you, yeah, for being disrespectful. I prepared for you. I respected your intelligence. I spent a bunch of time preparing because I knew that you were an intelligent person. So
Well,
if you're underprepared, send its own punishment. How dare you disrespect me like that? And then come out here saying, "Oh, I lost because I was underprepared." Well, then maybe next time you should prepare.
I'm not worried about the outcome, but I will say I'm much older than most of you, so I actually have a job and,
Okay,
things
that's
to
cool.
attend to, unfortunately.
That's base. That's base though.
Yes, hate to break it to you.
I have a job too, unfortunately. But that's still cool that you're contributing to society.
Yeah, I think Fula, like the nuance with what I was saying is, and what's funny is we actually, so okay, so how we even arrived here today is so funny because I honestly didn't care to be here. Sorry, Beluga, but I just wanted your opinion. But we could not come to terms we attacked regarding that 5 days ago. Um, but the nuance Fula was just that obviously adequacy is like a spectrum, and I think it's weird to say if he could have done more, given he had the power to do so.